Okay, you're safe.
According to that clock, anyway. I call the meeting to order. Let's go through introductions around the table. I'm Todd Bundy. We'll start.
I'm Margaret Minnick.
I'm Joanne Cornelius.
I'm Madison McDonald.
Carl Madsen.
Mark Riggs. Mark Morgans.
Leanne Thompson. Julia Decker.
Ian Sisson.
Chris Anderson. Very good.
Oh,
I'll have that.
Sorry, for the record, we have Linda Eierman and Charles Dice, committee members, are excused from today's meeting. So
Right.
we have Chris, Todd, and Margaret today.
Yeah, so we do have a quorum. Okay, on the agenda we have the summary from the last meeting. There are a couple things I would like to suggest that we change on that. Are there any other responses to the minutes of the last meeting that Ian sent out? Discussion of goal 3 were the things that we passed. If not, I'll go ahead with mine. Proposal 2 reads, Clatsop County should avoid converting agricultural land to urban uses or other non-farm uses through the use of EFUs, exclusive farm use, limitations on farm uses, minimum lot sizes, and dwelling approval standards. I don't know, I thought that might be a little bit confusing, so I rewrote it almost word for word, but not quite. Clatsop County should avoid converting agricultural land to urban uses or other non-farm uses through the use of planning tools such as EFU zones, minimum lot sizes, and dwelling approval standards. And what I'll do is I will email you these, Ian, the whole thing. So I suppose the proper thing to do is to ask for a motion and a second on making that change in language. Hearing none, we'll pass to the next one. Proposal is to, now on number 4, rewording the proposal number 4. The alternate wording is pretty much what I have here. It's having local food systems should be encouraged. Locally grown food will combat hunger. Food grown and consumed locally in local communities will reduce reliance on transportation. Cultivation of locally suited crop species will also reduce use of pesticides. Anybody want to move to adopt that?
I would move to adopt both of the ones you just described.
Oh,
I just I didn't think fast enough on the first one.
okay.
But yeah, it
could I
makes
just
more
ask-
sense to provide guidance rather than like exactly this is how staff should do it.
Yeah.
So that makes sense to me.
Is it acceptable to have the minutes say something that didn't happen in that meeting, but amend them from this meeting to, because I agree with you, you were just scrambling to try and capture the
We were
thoughts in an
indeed,
intelligible way.
and the language was, it's only a change in language, it's not
No.
a change in meaning.
In concept at all. I just don't know if it's legit. I've never had that question before. I just didn't know the parliamentary procedure, and since
To
the
amend
board
minutes,
is...
I thought that was part of what we did.
Well, yeah, except you're amending the minutes to something that didn't exactly happen during the meeting. It's not,
Oh, so-
that's not the language you came up with during the meeting.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that you can't look at it and say, we want to rework these goals, but I think
Right.
you're dealing with a new set of motions rather than changing it in the minutes.
Right.
Okay.
So we could just have it in the minutes for this meeting.
That you
That
looked at
these
these
two
and said,
want
hey,
advice
we
on.
want to tweak these. That's what I would suggest.
Okay.
Right, well, that's kind of what I had in mind.
Yeah, so not changing your minutes, but just saying, hey, looking at these minutes, we see this language, and I'm going to make these suggestions, so then it becomes part of these
Okay,
minutes.
very good.
So before we get too far then, are there any corrections to the minutes from the last meeting?
I didn't see that.
Just to make...
I wasn't here,
Oh,
so
was
I can't speak to that.
So, no,
Okay.
the answer is no. Then, moving on. Okay, Margaret has made a motion to approve these two revised statements. Chris?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay? No. So, okay, you move
Quick
on.
and easy.
Next thing in the agenda is cookies.
Oh, yeah. Who brought the cookies? Thank you so much.
Great.
It's a nice treat.
Is a report from the countywide committee meeting. And let's see, I have that here. So the focus of the meeting, the countywide meeting, was on forestry, and it was a presentation by Paul Clements, State Forest representative. He led the presentation. He reviewed the history of forest practices, starting with Theodore Roosevelt in 1909. And I'm not going to go through all my notes on what he said there, but unless you wish me to.
I'm familiar.
Okay. And he passed out the Forest Practices Administrative and Forest Practices Act, and we discussed those. He then introduced Matt Friesen, who is an economist with the State Forestry Department, who talked about taxes on timber and timber harvest. So there's both real estate taxes and there are taxes on the harvests that they make. And so that was discussed. There were many questions, a few of which generated discussion. One was the lack of notification of surrounding property owners prior to spraying operations, and we have a response to that in our suggestions today. And a second was how can we protect the water quality from harmful logging practices, and that also we have some in our suggestions for today. So those were the two main topics that were covered. That pretty much concludes my notes for the countywide meeting. Any questions about that?
Mr. Chair, could I just add one thing?
Yes.
One of the most important things that I heard from that meeting is my bureaucrat's ear. Paul Clements talked about how the specific part in the administrative rule where people can do research, bring that research to the Board of Forestry, valid research. And I mean, it isn't just stuff that people make up or think is true or want to be true. Bring it to the Board of Forestry and ask them to amend the administrative rules for their area in response to their carefully vetted research. I thought that was very significant.
No, that's interesting.
You did a good job of describing that process.
Yeah.
I think you detected there was an interest in that, and so how to actually achieve those results. And so we did a good job introducing that.
Has any area successfully done that?
Yes.
It happens all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And what scale of area are we talking about?
Oceanside Water District, Dr. Paul Newman is doing research with Stimson about pesticide
Okay.
applications.
So basically just on a watershed level. Okay. Thank you. Interesting.
Well, that's a key.
Okay, let's. Then we had both Charles and Linda and myself offered comments, which we could either adopt as recommendations or just accept as comments. And there are a lot of them. So shall I just charge on into them?
Are we still on the liaison report?
No, liaison report I just concluded.
Okay.
So wait, sorry, what did you just say?
So, do you
The
have
questions?
any questions about the liaison report?
No.
No, sir.
It was more of a lesson, a class kind of thing than it was a regular meeting.
Right, was that the same as the workshop? Was that
was
on
the
October
workshop.
17th?
Yes, that's what it was.
Okay.
That's what it was.
Okay, yeah, I read the presentations from those.
Oh, good.
So yeah, that workshop took place instead of a regular meeting of the countywide advisory committee.
So are they now like sort of behind us in schedule? Like when's their next meeting?
They have a meeting scheduled this month, I think,
Next
next
week.
week.
Yes.
Next
Um,
week. I think it's Thursday?
I think you're right, the 21st.
Yes, it's the 21st.
Okay.
And they will be, I'm not sure what's on their agenda. I apologize. I'm not
That's
aware.
okay.
I think it's goal 4.
I think it's still goal 4 because
Yeah,
we'll
it
get
is.
to this at the end of the meeting, but our plan is to take a hiatus over the holidays and through the beginning of winter, so that we can collect all the recommendations that we've received so far from the advisory committees on goals 1 through 4.
Okay.
And we can start to draft some proposed language for the updated comp plan and give that back to you. And in the meantime, we have a lot of material on goal 5 for you to get through.
Okay.
And goal 5 is we're going to break it into chunks because it's such a large and wide-ranging set of goals and principles and information.
Okay.
So the hiatus will give you some time to start breaking into goal 5, and it will give us some time to kind of hit the books on putting some language together for you to review on the first 4 goals.
And that's going to be, all the districts will have, you'll compile all their recommendations.
Yep, so everyone is going to get through goal 4 before the end of the year. And then we will be working on compiling all the recommendations from all the committees and putting them into one document.
So will there be meetings in December?
That's up to the committees. Some are meeting and some are not.
I see.
So you can decide at the end of the meeting if you want to have a December meeting, or if you want to break.
Will the countywide group be meeting in December?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, then we probably need to. We're up to them now. To answer your question, we're caught up to them.
Okay.
Yeah, so everyone should be on the same page
Yeah.
at the end of the year.
Okay, these that I'm reading are primarily, the next section group is primarily what Charles Dice wrote.
Are we doing questions for staff?
Oh,
Or the
questions
goal
for
4
staff?
overview?
No, let's do those.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. No, that's good.
Sorry for interrupting.
We have questions for staff.
I do have a question for staff, and my question was, it seems like you guys have done a really admirable job of getting experts in to talk to the various community groups, putting together the workshops. But I was a little concerned with the workshops about forest lands that we heard from the Department of Forestry. Did we hear from DLCD? Was that one of the presentations?
On goal
Yes,
4.
goal 3 and 4.
Okay.
There's the
Yeah.
farm forest
And
workshop.
we've heard, we got a statement from Timber Unity, and I think that's it so far. But I was just concerned that there wasn't any presentation or input from any conservation organizations or independent biologists, ecologists, scientists, because a lot has changed since the Forest Practices Act was enacted in forest science, in our understanding of forest ecology. And I just think it would have been good to have that perspective also. So I was just wondering why that is. Were we not able to get anyone? Did it not come up?
I think part of this is an evolving process.
Totally.
And I don't actually think you're through with goal 4.
Okay. Okay. And also, we could even incorporate that into the next goal. They're all related. I just wanted to put in a vote for having someone from that side of things present.
Well, and it's up to you also if you would like to meet in December, and that would be an opportunity to bring someone in to share that perspective. So if you have someone in mind,
I
let
don't
us
currently
know.
Okay.
We've reached out to a pretty wide range of different stakeholder groups, and we've done our best to
Okay.
use the time and resources we have and the meeting schedule we have to get people in front of the advisory committees. So thank you for pointing out the the perspective from your end that we're lacking some of that.
I agree. In fact, I thought the same thing, but we've gotten a lot of information from basically one side and a bit from Timber Unity, but we do need to see the whole picture. I mean, we're, after all, I was speaking for myself, I don't know much about timber management other than what I've learned here.
Yeah, and I've studied timber management in school, like not super in depth, but a little bit. But I will admit that I don't know too much about the specific issues in this area, I think we got a lot of the history, which actually I really appreciated. That was great. But I think it would be really helpful to hear
Absolutely.
that perspective.
Yeah,
Are you
I agree.
familiar with Beyond Toxics?
No.
They're a group of scientists down in Eugene that study this issue.
Mm-hmm.
You can go online and find them, and they have a lot of reports that they've been writing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd have one observation that you might have an opportunity even here closer rather than running to the urban areas to try to get a Eugene or a Portland perspective would be to, look at the local resources that you have here. And,
Sure.
You've got a great one just reminded up on the board there with the North Coast Land Conservancy, and they're a great example of having some local expertise. They're locals, so they understand our issues in our neighborhood a little bit better, and I imagine they'd appreciate being engaged. We're engaged in this, and we've kind of invited ourselves to the process here, not having been invited in the past, and are glad to participate in that at the one meeting. And you might have heard is that we've provided an opportunity that's coming up on the 21st for a forest tour out there too. And so
I did.
I
Thank
think
you
you
for
got
that.
that invitation. But I'd probably look at that, rather than trying to go to some of these.
Excuse me, but actually they're studying the watershed down the way that got, ruined by logging down in Nehalem. Yeah.
So Mark
They
was
gave a-
still speaking
I know,
rather
but
than,
I just-
but to interrupt him, I think is rude, and really,
Sorry
I think
about
the
that,
chair
but
should
I just wanted
really
to
not
correct
allow
some of that
interruption when
information.
someone is speaking.
Yeah, let's try to work through the chairman.
We do have opportunity for public comment built into the agenda, so it's up to you when you'd like to take that input.
Okay, yeah, that's true. We usually do that at the end, but this was appropriate at this point.
So I understand you've got a strong personal point of view on it, so I
Well, I
won't
will
debate you on that. So.
Okay, well, Margaret, good idea.
Okay.
And Ian, if you could arrange with someone like Timber Unity or someone
North
for
Coast
our
Land
next meeting.
Conservancy.
then we
North
might-
Coast Land Conservancy.
Huh?
We got a statement from Timber Unity.
I mean, pardon me, from the Conservancy.
Mr. Chair, if
Right.
I could just speak for just a second. As I said, I think that you're going to find that this is evolving, and I think that there's possibly an opportunity coming up for further discussion, maybe with all the CACs invited, probably in December. We're talking about that right now. So it might involve more of a roundtable discussion that includes multi-types of perspectives on it. So if you want to watch your email.
Oh, that's good.
So anyway, that's
Okay, great.
kind of something that, as I said, it's evolving.
Okay.
It's in process.
That's
Okay.
great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That could take place at a December meeting. for us.
Yeah, and that sounds like a good use of our
Yeah,
time
right.
because it's a pretty key issue in this county and want to get it right.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm not sure, we haven't got that all lined up. We've just been talking about it, I would say, in the last 48 hours or so.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, it's evolving.
Well, I'm happy
Great.
I'm not going anywhere for the holidays.
Yay!
Okay, let's get on.
Yay!
Workshops.
Who doesn't love a good meeting?
Can the public ask one question of staff during this process too? And excuse me for coming maybe late to the effort, but I noticed that you're concentrating today on goal 4. I noticed that these discussion bullet points are identical to the ones that were on the agenda for the Northeast region. So is each of the citizen advisory groups covering the exact same discussion points?
That is correct.
And then who developed these as discussion
Staff.
points? Staff being
Yeah, staff.
the planning staff.
Planning staff, correct, and it's just basically stuff that we developed as we were pulling the materials together and looking at things that are in the news and on everybody's minds right here, right now. So those questions are discussion points only. They're not anybody's point of view. They're just get the discussion started type things and to draw people to the table. And apparently that's worked.
Worked very well.
Touche.
Okay. As we go through these points that Charles, Linda, and myself have put out here, maybe we should check them off, Ian, from your list, and then we could go back and touch on those that we don't hit with these. Do you follow what I'm saying? Your list, the goal discussion list on the agenda has topics which we will be covering in the ideas that Linda and Charles have put together.
Just to reiterate, this list of bullet points is not prescriptive. You don't have to discuss any
Right,
of
no,
them
I
if you don't want
understand
to.
that.
So
I
it's
understand
up to the committee and up to the chair
Right.
how you would like to move through the discussion.
Well, that's how I'd like to move through
Do
it.
we want to do the goal 4 overview first? We still haven't talked about that.
Okay,
You
yeah,
guys
go
probably
ahead.
have a short
That's something you-
presentation. I enjoy your presentations.
All right.
Good.
So for the Goal 4 overview, I have a very brief presentation. So in the cover memo, you'll see a summary of what's included in the background materials. We have a summary report on Goal 4. We have the statewide planning goal. We have the Clatsop County Goal 4 element from the comprehensive plan. We have a fact sheet about the Forest Practices Act. We have an illustrated guide, which is very interesting, created by the Oregon Forest Resources Institute, or OFRI, on the forest protection laws, basically on the Forest Practices Act in Oregon. And we have a report from the Oregon Global Warming Commission on the Forest Carbon Project. That's from 2018. And we have some comments that were provided by Timber Unity for all the advisory committees to review on their perspective in this process in the review of Goal 4. And then we also have at the very end of the background materials a worksheet where you can go through and basically what we're looking at is what does Goal 4, what does the statewide planning Goal 4 say? And what do we currently have in the countywide Goal 4 element in the comprehensive plan? Are we meeting the requirements of the statewide goal? If not, what do we need to add or remove? And are there any other things basically that we need to include in Goal 4 that we don't currently have? So that's the summary of what's in the background information, and then just a quick summary of the background report. First and foremost, statewide planning Goal 4 is for forest lands to conserve forest lands by maintaining the forest land base and to protect the state's forest economy by making possible economically efficient forest practices that assure the continuous growing and harvesting of forest tree species as the leading use on forest land, consistent with sound management of soil, air, water, and fish and wildlife resources, and to provide for recreational opportunities and agriculture. So just to summarize, they're saying the chief use of forest land is production of forest products, or to harvest timber rather, and that it needs to be in balance with values around soil, air, water, quality, and fish and wildlife resources and recreation. So there's then a narrative about forest lands in Oregon and forest lands in Clatsop County. A couple of highlights from that, which I think are relevant to the discussion that we're going to have and the little bit of discussion that we've already had. And that is captured really well in this first paragraph, I think. Oregon's forests are working forests. Forests provide broad environmental, social, and economic benefits, including clean water, fish and wildlife habitat, jobs, products, recreation, and tax funds for communities. Logging and support activities for forestry form the base of Oregon's forestry industry. However, the county's forest lands are important to different stakeholders for different reasons that sometimes conflict with each other. So that's something we have to grapple with and a balance that we have to find. So most Oregon logs are purchased by wood product manufacturers in Oregon. That's something to consider as far as the economic effects and benefits. In 2014, 79% of Oregon's timber harvest came from private lands. We have a representative of a private forest landowner here. so we can get some interesting perspective, I think, from that. Forestry is an important source of high-paying jobs for many rural communities. Clatsop County is no exception. It's also home to one of the most productive state forests in Oregon, which generated $27.5 million in timber in 2017. $18.3 million of that revenue went to schools, roads, and other services, and then the rest went to the Department of Forestry for maintaining the forest land, managing wildfire risk, and things like that. Forestry-related jobs provide family wage incomes in Clatsop County, and so that's sort of an overview of the economic benefits and the importance to the regional economy. And then integrated with that, we have the crucial habitat for wildlife, which includes endangered and threatened species. We have watersheds and protection of watersheds to provide critical clean water and fish habitat, which is the foundation for the county's other huge industry, fishing. We also have forest lands that provide recreation for hiking, camping, hunting, fishing, other activities, and that's not only for locals, but considering the economic impact of tourism and the draw that recreation provides from a tourism perspective is also important to consider. And so balancing these economic benefits that forests provide is something to think about. Then we have, with changes in climate and increases in wildfire hazard, forest lands are at once both under threat and perhaps part of the survival strategy. They store vast amounts of carbon, and they also release oxygen as a byproduct. So something to consider when thinking about natural hazards with wildfire risks, which are exacerbated by a changing climate, and that forest could be both a problem and a solution somehow. Something to consider. So in Clatsop County, we have 843 square miles of land. Approximately 80% of the acreage in the county is timberland. So it's a huge share of our land here. Whether private or state-owned, and there's a small map there showing the comprehensive plan designations, and conservation forest lands is the green, which obviously takes up most of that map. With private forest lands, whether private or state-owned, industrial timberlands are managed under the Forest Practices Act. That's administered by the Oregon Department of Forestry. We had the workshop with the countywide committee last month, and Oregon Department of Forestry came in, as well as the Department of Revenue, to talk about how that system works. The Forest Practices Act sets standards for all commercial activities involving establishment, management, and harvesting of trees on Oregon's forest lands. ODF is responsible for enforcing those requirements, and that's an important note because a lot of the time, in terms of people buying and selling land and using land, commercial forestry is not something that the county is involved in regulating. It is really up to Oregon Department of Forestry and the rules incorporated in the Oregon Forest Practices Act. So ODF reviews pre-operations plans, they oversee operations, they ensure that reforestation occurs, and they have specific rules for that. They investigate complaints, and they enforce corrective actions when violations occur. The rest of the background report discusses management and planning of forest lands, and discusses the forest land management classification system. The system has been applied to state forest land and designates different conservation areas. There's high value conservation areas which are managed specifically for conservation. They emphasize the protection of old growth trees, endangered species and habitat, rare plants, water quality, and other things. ODF also offers some planning incentives, helping landowners access incentives through the Federal Forest Legacy Program, the Community Forest Program, and the Conservation Reserve Program. These are voluntary on the part of landowners and provide a variety of strategies for landowners, governments, and nonprofit groups to acquire land to grow and sustain a community forest. protecting soil, water, fish, and wildlife. The last section, close to the last section, is on wildfire. And most private landowners have Oregon Department of Forestry or a local fire protection association or district to protect their lands. Excuse me. They pay a forest patrol assessment to receive that fire protection benefit. So that's important to note as well. That's a major concern, and increasingly so with the wildfire risks that we're seeing and drought conditions. Other organizations concerned with wildfire in Oregon include 1,000 Friends of Oregon, which recently issued a report in 2018 called A New Vision for Wildfire Planning, a report on land use and wildfires, so there's a link to that. Next is recreation, and a few different sites are identified, which I believe are all within the Clatsop State Forest. That's Henry Ryerson Spruce Run Campground, Knapp Creek Campground, Northrop Creek Horse Camp, Viewpoint Campground, Beaver Eddy, and the State Fish Hatcheries. So those are some recreation resources that exist. It's certainly not an exhaustive list. In 2014, and we have Commissioner Thompson here today who may be able to shed some more insight on this topic, but there was a Clatsop Vision 2030 Together, which was adopted in March 2014, and it discussed some strategies around forestry, and those are listed there in a bulleted list. There is the protection of the natural resource base, promotion of sustainable forestry, protection of natural areas, fish and wildlife habitat, and fish and wildlife habitat restoration plans. So one thing that's important to consider in the comprehensive plan update process is relationship to other plans that we've already made and how we can pull from those and integrate those into the comprehensive plan so that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. So think about that. Then we have forest carbon accounting. So this is something that's been increasingly a popular topic to discuss, especially in the state legislature. And so there is discussion about the development of climate policy that involves carbon pricing and also goals for carbon accounting. And so what that means is recognizing the value that forests have for sequestering carbon and tracking and evaluating the carbon sequestration potential of Oregon's forests, alternative methods of forest management that can increase carbon sequestration, reduce the loss of carbon sequestration to wildlife, sorry, that's confusing, changes in the mortality and distribution of tree and other plant species, and the extent to which carbon is stored in tree-based building materials. So those are some goals of the Oregon Global Warming Commission as it relates to carbon sequestration. In the 2018 session, the legislature established the Office of Carbon Policy and included funding for further development of an assessment of the amount of carbon in Oregon's forests, and that report is in this packet of materials. And then the final thought here to bring it home and to reiterate something that was brought up right at the beginning is, with so many depending on the county's forest lands for so much, conflict seems inevitable, and balancing the needs and demands of public and private enterprise, environmental quality, and recreational pursuits is challenging. This is a first look at Goal 4 during this update process. It will not be the last. Success will come from recognizing all county residents have a stake in Goal 4, regardless of where they live, work, and play, and addressing the goal based from that perspective. So again, this will come up again and probably again. And so I don't expect that we'll solve all the problems or come up with all the great ideas today, but I think something that's important to focus on is finding balance between these often conflicting needs and desires and values.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. That's a good summary that you gave us.
So I have one question. So the Forest Practices Act, does that apply to all, like, it applies to state-owned, like state forests, privately owned forests?
Yes.
Anybody harvesting commercially.
Okay. And we don't have any federal forest in Clatsop County, do we?
0.05%.
Okay.
Where is that?
Does it apply to them too? Just
We
for
have
my
over by
education?
Columbia County.
It doesn't
Oh,
apply to
okay.
them? Okay. Thanks.
They're their own universe,
Yeah.
Okay.
but it's
It doesn't really impact us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like 2 trees or something.
I have a question regarding percentage of private land, timber harvested from private land that is shipped offshore.
So that was briefly touched on in the background report. I don't think I went over that point specifically. The majority of timber, from what I understand, and we have other people in the room who may know a little bit better than me, it sounds like the majority of timber harvest in Oregon is used in Oregon, or at least stays in the United States, and is used for building materials and other products.
Is that both
So it's
state and private land?
I believe so. The export industry internationally is a pretty small portion of that
Timber
economy.
harvest from state lands is exempt. It cannot be exported.
Right, I understand that, and so that's why I'm asking
So
about
only-
private land.
So it
With
says most
private.
Oregon logs are purchased by wood product manufacturers in Oregon, but that doesn't mean that once the wood products are manufactured, that they
Those
stay in
products may
Oregon.
be exported.
Right.
Are logs considered wood products?
Yeah, when does it change?
That's a good question, but I think you'll find some really good actual numbers, data from that OFRI. I mentioned Oregon Forest Resources Institute, so they've got a lot of information to that. In our example, as the largest private landowner in the county, I can share with you that the majority of our logs do go to local manufacturing facilities in both Clatsop and Tillamook County, but we do participate. Anybody that's in the forest products, wood products business that's within our region, we do try to have a relationship with them to some extent. So we don't exclude just because somebody has a certain market for the products they produce, we don't exclude them from having a business relationship with us. So such as Astoria had been exporting logs in the past, we had a relationship with them, but it's a much smaller extent than what we do with the local manufacturers.
But you don't have any idea what percentage of logs, of harvested logs?
No, I get that information from OFRI. It's online there, or some of the
Okay.
other publications they have.
And
They're
a
the ones-
lot of it's across the river, isn't it, in Washington?
Yeah.
I mean, I see a lot of logs over
Well, Longview,
yeah.
Sure, we do sell logs into
a
Longview
lot
too.
of carnage there.
Okay, let's see. So now we come to this thing I've been trying to jump to.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, Todd.
No, you're right.
Just a stickler. I'm
You
sorry.
keep me on track here. Okay, so I think maybe it would be easier to have, rather than me read them, to just look at these that Ian has passed out. We start with Charles Dice's list.
Okay.
Have you both had a chance to read these?
Yes.
So we could just go through them by the number and decide whether we want to make them as a motion and include them as recommendations, to be included with the other recommendations.
Yeah.
Or if we want to just take them as information, thank you very much. So the first one is,
Maybe we should just discuss them first.
yes, let's discuss one at a time.
Okay.
Number one is protection of watershed is a critical issue.
Are those available for others to review too?
Sure. I brought some extra copies.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how we
Charles.
Well,
And then there were some more.
you don't know how
we would incorporate the references, I mean, in terms of any kind of recommendation.
Right, well, we can't probably incorporate the references. So what he's pointing out is that the existing Forest Practices Act doesn't adequately protect watersheds for community or municipal drinking water. At least that's been the experience of some communities in our area, in our county. And he offers some references. And so then he has a proposal for a provision in Goal 4 and zoning changes that it basically says that watersheds will be protected. And I have some alternative wording for that we could talk about. But to what extent is the county able to influence what happens in the forests, in the private timberlands, in the state forest?
You're making aspirational goals
Right.
for Goal 4.
Okay.
So I heard you say something about changing zoning. This process does not change zoning.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so these are aspirational goals, and they may make it to a point where the County Board of Commissioners looks at it and says, hey, we want to talk to you legislators. We want to support these kinds of reviews or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like changing regulations or changing laws right here, right now, this isn't going to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
I
so
know
if
that. I don't have any delusions about that.
If the committee wanted to make an aspirational goal that there was some changes made to regulations around forestry, is the question, how would that happen? You know, if you made that as an aspirational goal, what would be the process for the implementation of that goal?
Yeah, but I guess maybe we don't have to know that. That's more your guys' job to know that. Like, we can say, here's our vision.
Right, we would support something that, with this end idea or something
Mm-hmm.
like that, without getting too far into the weeds about how it happens.
Yeah, okay. Because what Charles shared as ideas were, watersheds for community and municipal drinking water in Clatsop County that extend into forest lands need special protections in addition to what is currently specified in the Forest Practices Act. And he has some specifics. And then he also says the comprehensive plan update should include wording that encourages Clatsop County planning to work with community and municipal water districts whenever there is a possibility for the district to acquire their watershed or a portion thereof, which we've seen, some communities do, or acquire conservation easements. And then my thought was, county policy should ensure that communities, residents, and visitors have clean and adequate water from forested watersheds. So is there something in there that the whatever we are we a committee?
Yes.
We can make a motion.
That we're interested in sort of formulating out of
I
those
think all of
ideas?
those are ideas we want to include.
Okay.
Aspirational goals.
Right.
Keep that term.
And then you guys can figure out how to do it.
It seems that you might have the opportunity also to kind of use the model you did for Goal 3. You did a nice job with that when you were reviewing it. And you looked at trying to keep farmland, as working farmland. You mentioned a couple goals, responsibilities for that, the value from it. But then you're getting, okay, that's the underlying goal, and also is consistent with Ian shared with us as the foundation, would be, okay, let's keep forests working for us. Let's look at not converting forest land to other uses, and continue it as a source of raw materials for building materials, carbon sequestration, but also important for a water source for the community. So I would encourage you to look at it as being consistent to what's been established as a goal for precedence with that. Use the precedence of what you said for Goal 3 already as far as protecting farmland, and say also you would have an expectation as that forest land managers provide a clean water source for the communities. And I would say, I'd continue with that. You could stop there saying similar to what we're doing now already. And Charles, actually a lot of the things that he's saying with a little bit more research would find out is that most of those 3 bullet points that he's saying there are being accomplished now. And it could just be an education. Most forest landowners do that outreach to communication before an activity. What he's asking for, number 1, is actually in the Ferns program for the Oregon Department of Forestry currently. So you can find that as a subscriber now at this time. And then if you had some specific things like number 2 would be is only a very small amount of chemicals in this case are actually used in watersheds. But that could be something that you might see would be an additional advantageous to put some more restrictions on that. So if there were some specific things that raised concerns such as introducing a chemical product into a municipal watershed, build that in, but at the same time saying, let's keep these forests working. Let's keep them providing jobs, the tax base, the building materials, but let's make sure that that water that's coming off of these resources is primary, because that's important for us. And as alluded earlier, it's also important for our economic development if we look at how much water is being consumed really from transient visitors through the county too.
We basically turn it over to these guys to make sure that whatever we recommend is not duplication of what the existing rules are. So if we come up with something that is consistent with existing rules, that's just fine.
Well, and I feel that the statewide planning goal already says pretty emphatically that everything that's timberland should remain timberland, and that's the most important thing.
Right.
So I don't really feel the need to reiterate that.
But didn't you do that though with your recommendations for goal 3?
I wasn't here.
Yeah,
Well, I
there's-
didn't read it, either was I, but I could read what was said.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it's all right for us to say it again. I mean, that's kind of reiterating, doesn't matter. Because whatever we recommend, if it's something unique and new, that will have some impact. If it's something that is already in the rules, well, that's just already in the rules. And that'll be, you guys will say, well, this is reinforcement that that's a good thing to keep.
Sure. Yeah, there's certainly a benefit to understanding what policies and rules and goals are already existing, so that you don't spend too much time on trying to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
But there's also no problem with reaffirming what we have and saying we want to stick to our guns on these things because those are still really important 40 years later from the original comprehensive plan.
Good. So,
Yeah, it already says that actually. Well, let's see. It already says that in the Clatsop County goals and policies. Conserve forest lands
That is
for
a good
forest
sheet
uses.
to be looking at in this process. So.
Forest lands shall be conserved for forest uses, including the production of trees and the processing of forest products, open space buffers from noise, et cetera, watershed protection, blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, it's saying, like, let's not chop down forests and turn them into towns or whatever, right? That's what it's saying.
I guess what I would like to do is not try to prune these down so that we don't cover anything that's already covered, because I leave it to those people to do that.
Right.
The staff can do that.
And then I also think, just thinking about this a little bit more, you brought up North Coast Land Conservancy, and they have worked with private landowners to buy some of their forest lands that are not productive anymore. Isn't that turning land that was for timber production into not for timber production?
No, it's still,
Yeah,
No, it's conservation.
Well, it depends upon how their use of it. Another example would be the forest reserve behind Cannon Beach that was state forest land, and they made a forest reserve on it, then are restricting log production, but it still is a forest that's sequestering carbon.
Absolutely,
So in combination with all the forest lands in the region, it has a value.
Right, absolutely, yeah. But I don't think that, if we say that forest lands that are used for timber production, I'm sorry if I'm using wrong terms,
No?
they should all stay in timber production. I mean, that's
Yeah, that's a good point.
not, I wouldn't support something like that. Because, North Coast Land Conservancy is buying these lands and conserving them, and I think that's a good thing.
Just wanted to point out too that even some lands that have been designated for conservation still have selective harvesting that happens. And still, there's a management cost associated even with managing a forest tract of land for conservation purposes, and oftentimes it's funded by selective harvesting and commercial sale of the timber. I also wanted to just point out that under Policy 1 of Goal 4, we have forest lands shall be conserved for forest uses. And so forest uses is a pretty broad term that encompasses both commercial timber harvest and conservation, wildlife protection, watershed protection, and things like that. So when we say keep forest lands in forest use, it doesn't necessarily mean commercial timber harvest.
Yeah.
It can mean all sorts of things. So I just want to make sure that's clear.
Well, if we say that, if we say, keep forest lands in forest uses, and this is our definition of forest uses, that seems like a good thing for me, but it's already there. So can we just say, retain the statement? Or?
So, right.
Right, or
So
make your notes off to the side.
this worksheet
Put
here.
my Y on there.
This worksheet here is a really probably good way of moving through the goal 4 discussion to look at what we already have in the comprehensive plan. So that's sort of what this whole process is about, right? Mm-hmm. To look at what we already have in the comprehensive plan, look at what we're required to have in the comprehensive plan per state regulations and rules, and then to assess whether we are meeting our mandate for the state goal, and also to look at anything that should be added or removed. Of course, we have to have everything that we're required to have per the state rules,
Right.
but we can also add to that. So we can't have any less than what we're required to have, but we can have more. So to look at what we already have in place is probably a good starting point to jump off from the discussion of what we might want to change and add or modify.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure, Charles has a paragraph here that I'm very interested in. In addition, when it says the planning department is supposed to, whenever there's a possibility of the district to acquire the watershed, there's a pending issue before the County Board of Commissioners now for $250,000 set aside. So what he's saying is county taxpayer dollars will be spent or loaned to for example, the Arch Cape Forest. I mean, there's a larger backdrop for all of this. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to distract from the process, but I want to note that if we're talking about money here, money is never mentioned specifically in here, but the implication, I think, is taxpayer dollars will be spent. I just want to note that so that it doesn't get lost in the discussion, please.
Mm-hmm. There are a couple things we want to have lost, and that is our other committee members have gone to a lot of work to put this stuff together, and we need to go through these also.
Okay.
So, we have what, an hour left?
So what if, we kind of go through these and figure out what the high level ask is from each of these, and then go through like Ian suggested and
That
see
sounds
where
good.
there's like any mismatches, and of course anything that the three of us want to
As
add.
long as we go through these, I'm happy.
Okay, let's do it.
Um,
Sorry for derailing a little bit.
No, you didn't. I think you're right.
I learned a lot though, so.
It's like a roundabout.
Yeah.
So we could, if we wanted to go really quickly, we could just accept these things. Like the first group, number 1, under Charles's. Did you have some changes to that you wanted to make?
Well, it's awfully long. What are we?
Well, we want to just accept it as a recommendation to be included with other recommendations for the staff to put
The
together.
problem with this numeration system is he's got 1, 2, 3, and then within number 1 he also has a 1, 2, 3 instead of an ABC. So
Maybe 1.1 or
No,
1.2 or?
CD.
well,
we
the numbers
can
here
change
are
that.
1, 2, 3. All I'm
Oh,
saying.
down there.
Yeah.
I don't think you guys have trouble working with that, do you?
Okay.
No.
Just so that the record is clear, though, and if anyone has listened, because I do have people tell me that they listen to the meeting
Oh.
minutes. So I try and make things clear for the people who are listening who are not here.
But I have one observation with that. You made a good point earlier about not being redundant, not repeating things that are already law. And his item number 1.1 is already the law. He's not asking for anything that's not already done now. And it's been required by the forest practice regulations for a
Yeah,
long
but the
time.
point, my point is that let's let the staff deal with the duplication. Otherwise, we will have to try to go through item by item and see if it's in the rules.
Okay, I was just
We
using
only have an
the
hour.
wrong comments earlier.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about repeating things.
But you are welcome to affirm anything that you look at that's already there.
Yeah, then that would be what we're doing.
Excellent.
Yeah. Are there any changes to this, and do you want, how do you guys want to proceed? I can't make motions as a chair.
Oh, okay. You can't. So all of these proposals are going to go to the countywide? Is that how it works? Okay. This one is awfully long.
Yeah.
Is there any way that we want to tighten it up? Summarize it?
Well, we could take the references out.
Yeah.
Below are some links.
So we could just have the first two sentences.
And then skip the I believe part.
Yeah, exactly. And then start with watersheds again.
Yes.
And this all caps shall, how are we feeling about that?
No, we don't need to have the all caps. You just wanted to emphasize that.
Okay.
You guys, what would you deal with? If you saw that in this, would you say, in fact, I didn't write it as all caps, I wrote it here.
Oh, okay, good.
Sending them as this.
Was it for emphasis or was it
It's-
a typo? I don't.
No, it's emphasis.
It is.
Yeah, I'm sure. Shall is a legal term, meaning they absolutely must do it instead of will being they have the right to do it.
Okay.
We usually reserve all caps for acronyms.
Oh, yeah, right, okay, there we go, that's
Sure.
it.
I think that from there down is fine as long as we kind of get rid of the all caps.
Okay.
Which I feel like I'm being yelled at.
Okay, any changes to those, to that number one, other than that?
And this is, with the knowledge that it'll be kind of considered and.
I think he just wanted to make sure he was on the record.
Yeah.
I know he has strong feelings about the
Yeah.
watershed, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, that's basically what he has in all of his comments, the watershed things, aren't they?
All right, so if we remove from below down to states, if we just delete that.
Let me see if I get this, I'm gonna get these off of here again. So, from below down to, I believe, states, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
delete that.
Delete.
I would bring a motion that what are we doing? We're sending that recommendation to the countywide committee?
Yes, that we recommend, yeah.
Okay.
And that goes down to affected, right? Down to and including affected areas.
Yeah, I guess maybe we should consider that the in addition as a separate item, like this one.
Yeah, right, that's different.
We're going to consider, okay,
Right.
we're going to separate that out. Okay, cool.
So,
And,
Chris, you
if
with
all
us
those
on
things are
this?
already required, and then it's fine. We're just saying
And we'll just
yes.
change the
We
number.
affirm these.
And I'm not going to actually change the number. Well, I will. I can just do it. B and C. So that's done correctly. All right. Then would you make that a motion? Or-
Yes, I move that we have, that this proposal, that we, adopt this proposal,
Okay.
as we just discussed changing it. Do you want to read it? Can you read it? Are you
can-
allowed to?
Yeah, I can read it.
He needs a
I haven't
second.
done much motioning, sorry.
Do I need to read it? We all have it in front of us.
Well, you need a second, and then you should
We
read
need
it.
a second.
Last section.
Okay.
Okay, now you read it.
In favor, say aye.
Well, you have to read
I have to read the whole thing?
Yes.
All right. Protection of watersheds is a critical issue. Unfortunately, the existing Forest Practices Act does not do a good job of adequately protecting watersheds for community or municipal drinking water. Watersheds for the community and municipal drinking water in Clatsop County that extend into forest land need special protections in addition to what is currently specified in the Forest Practices Act. For such watershed areas, the forest owner shall, A, provide advance notice to any affected community or municipal water district regarding any forest practice activity that is planned for such watershed areas, including but not limited to aerial spraying, clear cutting, alteration of existing drainage, such as road construction and modifications. B, avoid use of chemical applications in watershed areas. C, negotiate in good faith with the affected community and municipal water districts to ensure that watersheds will not be adversely affected. That's it. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed, it's unanimous. Okay. All right. And the next one is notification should be provided to nearby neighbors and communities within 1 mile radius about burning of slash piles so that community members are aware that this is occurring and can be vigilant about the spread of any such fires.
You know something about that, don't you, Mark?
I would accept a
I
motion
know that
to
Gary's
adopt
got some
that.
history of that we had nothing to do with.
Yeah, we're not really fighting it.
Yeah, I was helping put them out. So.
Yeah.
No motion heard?
Well, it seems like is there notification required now?
Yes, but I don't know about burning. Has to do just with burning and the 1 mile radius. I didn't see that in the rules, did you?
It is a requirement now because we have to get permission on the day to be able to burn from the Oregon Department of Forestry because they're looking at how the smoke's going to be dispersed through the air. And so you do have to get that. They give you a permit to burn, and it's based on how many tons you can burn on a given day. And then the state does some notification if you're a subscriber to that system too. And then most of the landowners will contact folks with that also. So I can't speak for all of them, but in addition to ODF, a lot of times we'll call like the 911 dispatch center and other people that identify themselves wanting to be notified, but that's not required by law.
Okay.
But the part that ODF does notify whoever has asked to be notified, that does occur.
So that's up to the Department of Forestry to do that.
They do it.
And the private landowner, the timber operator.
Yeah, we have to request permission from the state to burn. We fill out a permit and all the information about it, and then we have to work with them on that day, the actual day. They'll sometimes get back in touch with us and they'll say, okay, it's a good smoke dispersion day, and they'll go ahead and grant you a permit to do the burning on that day.
But there's nothing about notification for the private individual, the private property owner. You don't have, if you see anything
Yes,
here.
there is more in here that Charles is asking for than is currently
That's
required.
right, that's
Okay.
right.
Yes.
But the reason it gets complicated, if I could just, both with pesticides and with burning, is because, as Mark says, it's the conditions, the wind speed,
Sure.
the wind direction,
Right.
in that instant,
Well, the
in that
state does
instant
that.
day. But that's what makes
Yeah.
it complicated in terms of notifying people. Because if we could use, for example, something like classic alerts, which the county has so far resisted, then there'd be a way to disperse the information. But we had 2 fires here that were slash burn fires that are fresh in our minds, that
Right.
weren't seen as anything more than brush fires by folks up in Astoria that we took very seriously.
Sure.
So I understand the basis for the concern, but the complexity of actually implementing it instantly, because that's what we're asking for. The permission has to be granted instantly, so then the notification has to also come instantly.
Well, then we could change the wording to say the intention or application for burning, rather than actual burning, to accommodate the changes that happen in terms of timing.
Like maybe a window, is there like a window of time when you
It's
request?
usually a couple hours. Yeah, but you could ask that ODF kind of expand their notification system. Right now, we're already getting if you're on the email system, you get a list from them of where they're going to burn by lat and long, and they send a map that shows where it's possibly where it's going to occur. We subscribe so we know that if our neighbors are burning next to us.
Right,
So,
right. And I hear what you're saying, Leanne, but I mean, I would say that instant communication is
Okay,
Theoretically
Julia?
possible.
Julia?
theoretically possible.
Let's
Yes,
keep
Julia.
it.
I just have a quick comment, and that is, I think you guys are trying to get too far into the weeds and actually write the regulations, when maybe what you really want to do is just say,
Yeah.
we would support some sort of a notification system or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe not try and smith it down to the point of like exactly how to do it.
Yeah, you're
That's,
right.
that's, let's
I
go
appreciate
with
that, thank you.
the higher level looking, let's look at the 30,000 foot view.
Okay.
Yeah,
So maybe something more along the lines of
Well, it does say should be provided. It doesn't say that they will be or shall be provided to neighbors.
Or like we encourage the county to adopt policies and tools for notification, et cetera, et cetera.
That would make a link. I mean, because I'm always concerned with how does it actually happen? Is it doable
Right,
as well? Which, as Julia notes, puts me down in the weeds. But
Yeah.
Right. And it's not really our,
Right, we're
I
gonna-
mean, not to be like glib, but like it's not really our problem. But
Right, well, so it's like, it gives some direction about what to look at, and then let people
who actually know what they're doing?
who have the expertise, well, the ODF, the landowners, the people actually on the ground working with it,
Yeah.
figure out what's the best way to do this.
Yeah.
This is our goal. How do we get there? We don't need you guys to come up with how we get there.
Right.
It could
We're-
be
We're
as
just
simple
identifying,
as
we're identifying an issue in the community.
identify that it would benefit the public interest to
Exactly.
do X,
Yeah,
but don't have to work out how it happens.
Yeah.
right.
Okay, let's try the, picking up on your wording. We encourage the county to adopt policies and tools to provide notification of neighbors and communities of the intention to burn slash. Does that cover it enough?
Do we want to include this part about so that community members are aware that this is occurring and can be vigilant about the spreading of any fires?
Yeah, we could include that.
We can encourage community members to be vigilant.
Encourage vigilance. Right, yeah.
it was an interesting experience, those two fires.
That was frightening,
Yeah,
and I was in Leicester.
Yeah, twice.
twice.
So that,
I guess the reason I'm encouraging us to include that is because it goes beyond the smoke issue, just to be at the ready.
There's a hypervigilance already, but yeah, I understand. There is. Well,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean,
it's
part of
understandable.
rural life.
Yeah. It's what we're seeing to the south.
allow me to just read what we just have come up with and see if this is it. We encourage the county to adopt policies and tools to provide notification of neighbors or to neighbors? Notification to neighbors.
It's always hard to.
And communities of the intention to burn slash, so that they can be vigilant about the spread of any such fires. Is that good enough?
I think so.
It gets to the point.
Yeah.
Okay, a motion, please.
I move to adopt this proposal and send it on to the countywide advisory committee.
Very good.
I second.
Those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. All right, the next one, Clatsop County Forest Land Zoning Ordinance should include a provision that, in the event of applications for residential use on forest land, land zoned for forest and agricultural forest, that the applicant must show that their residential development will not adversely impact animal migration travel corridors.
So in this case, are we talking about like just one house or?
Well, now,
What
we
are we
haven't
talking
had an
about?
opportunity to talk to Charles about what exactly he's discussing here. My mind automatically went to the template test dwelling sort of situation where
Right.
you have an AF zone or an F80 zone, and somebody has managed to get a conditional use permit to permit a single-family dwelling.
Okay.
That was kind of what I thought he might have been talking about. I don't know. So the conditions of approval, well, the regulations and conditions of approval usually do discuss impacts on animal, major large game habitat, for example. So we do usually ask for something. It's not usually quite this specific about known migration and travel corridors, however. One of the things the template test requires is that the dwelling be situated kind of clustered with whatever other development is in the area to actually mitigate impact on animals. And so you don't have a bunch of extra road development, or you don't have somebody putting in a septic system and laying a whole bunch of utilities out through the forest or something like that, that you actually kind of keep it clustered with other dwellings. And one of the things about the template test dwelling is that you have to have a certain amount of development already in place in order to get a template test dwelling. It's based on the soils in the area, and for the soils that we have around here, usually you have a 160-acre square template that you drop over the property centered on it, and you're looking for 11 tax lots and 3 developed homes as of January 1st, 1993. And it's a kind of an expensive application because staff does a bunch of work. We have to go back and look at all of the tax lots that were in existence in 1993 in that template, and we're looking for houses, not barns. We're looking for houses. So we're going back through assessor's records, and we're looking to see if that level of development was in place on that date. And if it is, then they can get the approval. But again, we're going to try and cluster them toward the rest of that development. So if that's what he's thinking about, then the regulations kind of already require that.
We also have under policy 5 here on your sheets a policy related to dwelling siting standards.
If he's thinking of some other type of development, then I don't know what it is.
I suggest we table this one until
Okay.
Charles is here.
Yeah, because I'm just not familiar with what the issue is, or like an example of a problem.
Okay,
So,
I'm going to say that this one was tabled.
okay.
And we have critters in our yards all the time.
Right.
Okay, moving on.
I had a deer in my yard yesterday morning.
I live with elk.
5 elk.
I live with elk, I live with deer, we have bobcat, we have all of those.
Ooh, where do you live?
I live out east.
Oh, good down here too.
Bobcat.
Well,
Oh,
they're
yeah.
glad for, it's clear run, it's
Oh,
like a super
yeah.
highway.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can get through and you cut the grass for them.
Okay, the next one on Charles' list is, well, it may be that this is suggested. Let's just read what he says there to ourselves.
This is,
You wrote this one with California involved.
exactly, this is Paradise,
Yeah, right.
and Santa Rosa, and yeah. Yeah.
That's a larger issue.
Yeah. I mean, especially the scale at which utility services operate.
Yeah, if you get PGE involved, you've got a whole different ballgame.
Right.
You could still support,
You can ask for it.
Support something with solar.
The idea.
Because it-
And I think Linda had some
Physics.
related, or at least a related point on that as well. She had a recommendation that all utilities are undergrounded.
Utilities should be required to move their transmission lines underground.
I don't know how practical
sounds very
it is for
expensive.
high-tension
Yeah.
lines.
well, that's when you're getting into the weeds.
Yeah,
Okay.
And
right.
what we're looking at is, aspirationally, would you recommend or support some sort of movement in that direction?
Yeah.
Would you recommend it? It doesn't mean that you're going to require it, because you don't have the power to do that anyway.
Right.
Yeah, no.
But if you bring it up, and you bring it up to this larger level where people look at it and go, going forward, this is what we probably should do. We should do it this
Right.
way, and as we replace things, we should do it this way. So you just let it bubble to the surface, and you make a recommendation, you encourage it, you support it, but understand that you're not going to be able to regulate it and say, thou shalt. We can't do that. You can't do that. I can't do anything.
How do you two feel about including something aspirational about changing utilities infrastructure to reduce the risk
We
of
could throw it in the
wildfires.
mix.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's
Okay.
worth
I
having.
mean, we've got a lot of forest,
We
we've
may
got a
end
lot
up
of
nowhere, but
rural,
it's- we might as well put it.
urban, wildland interface. what
Now,
they
I
call it.
changed his wording slightly. May I read what I have, and you can just see how it's different from what he said.
Absolutely.
All electric services, electric service providers who have infrastructure located on forest lands shall be required to maintain their utilities and utility corridor in a manner that will prevent forest fires or brush fires in general, and in particular to avoid forest fires resulting from A, transmission equipment failure, B, problems caused by vegetation intrusion on electrified lines, and C, natural events such as high winds. What do you think about that?
Are we getting a little too detailed with that last
Maybe
section?
we could be. Is that too detailed? It's still aspirational.
It's still aspirational, that's true.
I mean, part of me wonders if it should have, like if the wording should be more like, we support policies that move us in the direction of da-da-da. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, you're probably right.
That's probably a little bit more,
Because it sounds like what we're writing is laws. It sounds like we're
Right,
saying, here's a
and-
new law.
no, and-
clearly
and-
we are not.
yeah, you're
the
not.
Okay,
folks who
then
are
let's think of
doing that.
new wording. You're on it.
Oh,
So we should, instead of this, we should say that, what?
like, we support policies, or we support and recommend
Okay.
that the county develop policies. To encourage?
Which encourage?
Which encourage utilities to,
Safety or something.
Fireproofing their equipment or something.
fireproof their equipment and transmission lines.
Just something like that, is it?
Take all reasonable measures to prevent forest fires.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, but reasonable.
right, well, you're
Which one's
recognizing, you're recognizing something that right at the moment is in the news.
Yeah.
And you're recognizing it and saying, hey, we see this is an issue, somebody, somewhere, think of something, please.
Right.
I mean, if you look at some of the policies, I'm looking at page 3. If you look at some of these policies, you can see that some of them get a little bit into the weeds, but you kind of get a feel for how they did it before. Policy 12, for example, says off-road vehicles shall be strictly confined to established rock roads in order to prevent erosion, stream degradation, damage to young trees and seedlings, and disturbance of wildlife and its habitat. So the question is, was the goal met, and should it be retained or not? Staff didn't have any comments on that one, but you can kind of see how they were formulating the concept. 13, existing utility rights-of-way shall be utilized to the maximum extent possible before new rights-of-way are created. So you kind of see how they devised these, if that provides you with any kind of way of looking at it.
Should we be writing ours in this same kind of
It would be
language?
helpful if you kept that in mind. You might look at these and say, we like that, we'd like to keep that. You might also look at it and say, I don't see that happening, whichever one that might be. Staff has some comments over on the sides on some of these. I think we looked at it. The AF-20 and the F-38 don't exist anymore, for example. But these are kinds of ways that people were looking at it before.
It is, this again though, is a very good framework for this discussion, because what we're trying to do at the end of the day is update our existing comprehensive plan.
Right.
And so this is what's in there now. And so we want to look at that and address whether we're meeting the policies
I see your point. Yeah.
and whether they need to be changed.
and whether they need to be more inclusive of some things. For example, what Mr. Dice has brought up, what Ms. Ironman brings up, what any of you bring up. I'm going to include everybody else at the table here. Because maybe there are some new things that need to be addressed, some new policies that need to be added to the mix based on what we know now.
Right, so could you piggyback on policy number 13 with some additional language related to protecting from wildfire risks associated with utilities?
You might
New
consider
right-of-ways, that just has to do with
charging
right-of-ways.
units.
Right,
It's
so
not
what I'm saying is could you build on
using
that
law
and also
using
address
power.
utilities?
Expand it a little bit. Yeah.
You want, you've been, with this, it seems you've been staying kind of in, with one kind of point with each one of these, right? But if we were to say, this could be 13A or something.
Or we can use compound sentences too.
Yeah, we can.
Or you could make a totally new policy that's just about fire risk and addresses all kinds
That's what I'm
of
thinking.
different
Yeah.
topics
That's what I'm
related to
That's right.
fire risk.
You can do that.
And we just did that. So we support and recommend that the county develop policies which encourage utilities, I didn't get the word utilities, to take all reasonable, I didn't get this completed. All reasonable, what would you say?
Steps or measures.
Steps, yeah, there we go, good. Measures to prevent forest fires.
Nice. Nice.
Is that good enough?
Do we want to add anything specifically about transmission lines, or is that clear as it is?
Encourage
I mean, I don't
utilities
suppose,
to
like,
take.
you know,
I
the
think
sewer's not gonna
that
cost
would
the forest.
include it all. Both right-of-ways and transmission lines and everything else that's in the package. It's actually more inclusive than our being trying to.
Oh, that's true. All right, yeah. All right, I move that we
Move.
recommend that to the countywide committee.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, great. Moved and seconded. In favor, aye.
Aye.
Great, unanimous.
Couple with only 3 people here, you know, makes the rules pretty
It's tidy.
Okay,
limited.
that takes care of Charles. Does Linda have recognizing the importance of preserving both public and private forest land now and in the future? That's pretty much stated, so we don't need to reiterate that. Commercial timber, raw material, tax revenues it generates should be highly regulated to avoid reducing overall amount of forest land below the current level. And that one, I don't know if that's I didn't see that in the rules. But what I would like to say on that is that I understand the current level is not sustainable.
Sorry, what was the point?
The point is that forest harvest should not be taken more than what is sustainable. Presently, I understand that the state has been approving greater harvest than is sustainable in order to make their own budget. That's what
Right,
that's the news.
because the Department of Forestry is funded off of timber sales
Right.
primarily.
Right.
So when I see that, what I'm wondering is if she meant like, does she want the county to look at as a whole, at all the forest lands and the amount of timber that's being harvested and like do an analysis of whether it's sustainable or?
I think what she's saying is that the state should do that.
Right, well, then
Well,
that
we
would be
can't tell the state
statewide.
to.
Yeah.
Well, you can support the board, looking at my
Recommending.
commissioner, recommending the legislature
Or the Board of Forestry or
or
something.
the Board of Forestry,
Whatever it's.
the legislature direct the Board of Forestry or,
us.
It gets dicey.
I know.
It just gets dicey.
I don't know if you
to
can
use
direct
it.
the Board of Forestry.
We don't, no, we do not. That is a
No,
governor's
I was
creature.
thinking the legislature would do the directing.
Well, it's still the governor's board.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, it's complicated. And we don't have our hands on the
Right.
levers that manipulate that very complicated system. And so I think that's the frustration. Oh, we want to have this result and we don't care how it happens. But it's a complicated set of interrelated factors that complex, interrelated adaptive systems.
Could I ask a question of Mr. Lundy? Could I ask a question of Commissioner Thompson and
Of course,
Mr.
yes.
Morgan?
Thank you for asking.
Are either of you aware of any science behind the establishment of sort of a line that says this is when you've over-harvested? Is there a hard line? Is there a gray area?
That's
What research is there that exists to say this is when you've
So
over-harvested?
we know the Oregon Department of Forestry looks at that closely as mandated by law to do. And I'm thinking aspirationally of having something in there is that looking at state lands don't, that their timber harvest of state lands are sustainable and that there isn't a harvest beyond what the annual growth is. That's what foresters you look at. You wouldn't harvest more in a given year than what the accumulation of forest trees grow in volume. That would be something, that's one easy measure of sustainability. You don't harvest more than you grew consistently. You can do it maybe on a year if you needed to, revenue for something like that, as long as you didn't cut back on harvesting the next year. But it seems like you could make some sentence just about.
Now, is that state land? Does that have any jurisdiction over private land?
Well, that would be a forest management policy for state lands. Each
For
private-
all forest land in the state?
But is there any kind of like law of diminishing returns where you might not realize you're over-harvesting until it's too late?
Well, I'm thinking of forest fires and insect predation. I mean, stuff happens.
Sure.
Yeah, most private landowners have
Dynamic.
a really good inventory of what those lands are. You need to anymore, particularly so. And then they've got models of how well those stands are growing each year. A lot of work's come out of Oregon State, so we know how much is growing each year. And then they look at that over time. And again, you might have a departure from cutting more or less than what you grow each year for one reason or another. But then we do know sustainably how much you're going to produce. So it's never an unknown, like you say. You wouldn't come up against things. We don't know how much we've got and we're over harvesting without that knowledge. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's really helpful to know.
But it's complicated. There are a lot of people dealing with a lot of numbers, and then there's the ground truthing of it on the ground. I mean,
Right.
so it's a very complex set of dynamic systems in action. So to say we want to achieve this result, I mean, you can say that, but then to see how it would actually happen gets incredibly complicated. And maybe, as you said, the committee just wants to have that kind of aspirational goal. We want to see only sustainable harvesting in Oregon. Well, you would have people saying that's already happening.
Right.
And other people would say they disagree. So that's when I look at what Charles said were facts in those pieces. I read all those pieces. Those were opinions, and people conflate
Right.
those two. So
And there's so many different ways to define sustainability too, and what time frame are you talking about, and et
Yes.
cetera, et cetera.
yes. And you know, you can do whatever you want to do, but does it take you down a rabbit trail? Is there a more productive way of looking at it that will achieve the end that you want?
Okay, well, let's move on in the interest of trying to make it out of
Chair
here.
Lundy.
Well, yeah, it sounds like we'll probably continue
Yeah,
discussing
we
this.
probably
so.
are. And what I would suggest, if we get to that point, that we come in with these worksheets filled out and ready to discuss, so we can go through these like you would like to see us do.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, and I apologize at the last meeting. I don't think I emphasized that we have this available and that it's a really good tool to use for you, you know, when you're doing your homework and you're researching to fill this out and have it done and bring it to the meeting. I think you're right. That would be very helpful.
Okay. Let's get through these suggestions that our colleagues have made, and then we can deal with this. Maybe we'll have to have a meeting next month to review this, so we don't get back out of track.
Yeah, either way, it's fine.
No?
I'm around.
All right. So what we've come to here is commercial timber industry, while important to Clatsop County. I don't think we need to have all that, do we? Is that necessary?
Well, a couple of her paragraphs Charles covered. I think depending how you look at it, but for example, the fourth non-bolded paragraph, Charles emphasized forest fires and all that, which we've talked about. So I scratched that one. And then the sixth, the tree buffer zones, I think is all included in policy 1. It emphasizes buffer zones for noise and things like that. So I think we've covered that. So some of these she just might be trying to emphasize.
Okay.
But I think a lot of the language is already in there.
Tree buffer zone should be enforced in the street.
Well, then that means you couldn't harvest trees on a hillside, because the hillsides are up above the road, and if you're driving down the road and you can see, I mean, that seems unreasonable to me, but you're the committee.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I thought she was just talking about, as you drive and look to your left or right. But yeah, if you drive and you look up the mountain, yeah.
Or if you're standing on the beach, your view of
Yeah.
your view of the Coast Range is pretty
Yeah.
inclusive.
Yeah, no, that's
so
pretty much,
it's difficult. But a nice dense evergreen coastal range view from the beach sounds great. But
it seems to me that we could have some aspirational goal about widening the buffer zone along highways, because as it is now, it's so thin that a good wind knocks the trees down. And how wide would it have to be to make it that doesn't happen?
Well, you remember Tom Bergen went to the legislature after the 2007 storm because the highways were impassable because of the buffer zones. And he said, look, the highways are impassable because the trees have fallen because they were left to provide a visual buffer. And so what you
But a
got
wider
is,
buffer would prevent
protect
wind
them.
throw.
how wide is the buffer that
That's
you're...
what we need
Yeah, I
science
think
stuff.
Let's look at Mark.
I think some other states have some wider
It's really hard to
buffers.
say, and is it on the south side of a highway with the prevailing south-southeast winds, or the north side? And, so you can see some examples of that. In fact, whatever it is, 20 miles out Highway 26, you see the example of those trees that were left on the north side of the highway are doing fine. The ones on the south, the current law says is that there's a scenic, that certain highways are designated as scenic corridors, and that along those scenic corridors, the 300 feet from the edge of the asphalt is a scenic management area, and you either have to leave the first 150 feet unharvested, or the second 150 feet unharvested, or you do some thinning in there. So
Yeah.
in some of those cases, like I say, if you take the back 150 feet, you leave 150 feet right next to the highway on the south side, it just blows over. And so that law has been a challenging one to implement here on the coast, to say the least. So, but how wide, I didn't answer your thing. How wide is too wide, and then it's taking a private property. You can still put it aspirational, but it's like that's it could be more really high aspirational. Is that in your opinion, if you see a value in the scenic beauty for yourselves or for visitors along key corridors, is that view should be managed in a way to provide that quality when put maybe some measurements on there. So,
I kind of like that higher level way of looking at it, there is value, and I think there's actually economic value to maintaining those views. So like, for example, the clear cut above the road when you're going down into Cannon Beach from the north, or actually either way, over the hill there, it's like, that does not look good. So if you're a visitor coming to Cannon Beach, that's not going to leave you with a really great impression of Oregon, in my opinion.
You're right.
So I'm a commissioner, and I say somebody wants to see parkland, but how do we pay for county services with somebody's perception of parkland view?
Transit and lodging tax?
No, that doesn't do it. It doesn't, no, that isn't how the law is structured. So that's what we get into, is that whole comprehensive complex,
Yeah.
interactive, adaptive system. So somebody can want to see parkland. How do we pay the bills and protect the health of the people and the land and the water and all of that? It's
Well, I think you have to put tourism in the factor. If you have ugly highways, the tourists won't be likely to
well,
come.
and ugly is a temporary thing. If you look at clear cuts, they're almost always regrowing because Mother Nature regrows here. And the question is, what do they regrow and how long does it take?
Yeah.
And so again, over time, and how do we balance it?
Right.
How do we
But I
balance
think
it?
that, and obviously this is bigger than this committee, but I think a lot of existing laws and regulations create some incentives that maybe are not what we actually want these days. So for example, having the Department of Forestry be funded primarily by timber sales maybe makes their objectives not exactly what we want them to be nowadays, or not entirely not in balance, like we're talking about, right? And that's obviously not something we're going to solve here right
General
now.
fund of the state of
But
Oregon.
but I also wouldn't want to say, oh, we can't do anything about it. Like, we can say what we have to say. You know?
But looking at it and how are those
Absolutely.
decisions made?
Yeah, and I like to think that I keep those things in mind. But yeah, I mean, it's a very good point. But what kind of, community do we want to have now?
Right.
I would just want to point out here too that we have this report on carbon storage, and that it's been looked at as something that could be an economic resource.
Yes, yeah. I have actually a lot of experience with that, professionally.
It just seems like something
Yeah.
related to what's being discussed now about
Right,
how
so
do
that
you,
brings some
how do you pay
economic
the bills?
value. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for pointing that out.
To the landowner.
Right. So there are, there's money available for conserving your forest.
That was the first thing I said when I got elected, and then I looked at the difference between that money and the money from the other one, and it just wasn't. So it's the carbon market that has to change to
Yeah.
make that
Yeah.
It
come up,
does.
and how does that happen?
Oh, so maybe you
Yeah.
want to go about. I'm just going to sit here quietly.
May I make a suggestion? You could look at Oregon, at Washington, Idaho, and California and see what their buffers are. They're different.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
And they have a different tax base too.
Yeah.
So
We need to
so it's the offset, again, that we're looking at. So it's the overall community health that's included.
I mean, I would say as an aspirational goal to that we recommend the county, look into or develop policies that enable other forest uses to be valued
Okay.
with money. So that would include carbon offset credits. There's also this program that our county doesn't participate in, but it allows people to conserve their forests instead of, like one of the presenters at the workshop I wasn't at, but I read their presentations, talked about it. Let me see. Wildlife Habitat Conservation and Management Program administered by ODF&W.
Is that the special assessment that the county opted out of, or is that something different? That's the same thing.
Yeah. And obviously, like, I just read the presentation about it, so I
Decades
do
ago.
not know the details, and it sounds like it's be hard to opt back in, but,
And we don't know the reason for the opt-out. We don't.
okay.
That is not something that we have had access to. I mean, it's probably something that could be researched, but I don't know why the board made that decision at the time.
Okay. Well, I mean, I suppose, like I would, not having any delusion that I know what the answer is, I would just recommend that the county look at ways to incentivize or ways to enable landowners to participate in carbon offset credit programs and look into whether we could opt into this wildlife habitat conservation and management program. Because it's never going to be as much money as timber. Well, maybe not never, but it currently definitely is not going to be as much money as timber. Fine. But at least it's an option for part of land. For, if people are thinking that they want to do conservation, they just kind of need some extra money to make it happen.
But the county tax base too, that's the thing for the county services. Roads and police and mental health and education and all of that. I mean, that's the other part where timber comes into it, is the special districts funding as well as the county funding. There's a whole bunch of stuff that happens.
Well, that's probably going to need to change, I would think, eventually.
Keep working on it.
Yeah, we can diversify the economy of this county.
Yeah.
Tax the trust fund liberals.
So I'm not sure if I'm supposed to raise my
Mr.
hand.
Lundy, there's someone who'd like to comment, I think.
Oh, yes, please.
Sorry.
No,
Sometimes I've just been speaking up and I'm just trying to follow protocol. So if you're
Well,
accepting.
you don't want to be considered rude.
I enjoy that too, but I've never been commented before. But if you're accepting kind of public comment, could I comment on one relating to carbon and water? It seems like we've been kind of circling around that. I like where the conversation's going. And I would encourage the committee to look at some of those possible mechanisms, and be it cap and trade or something where a forest landowner could look at some either voluntary conservation efforts and then receive some revenue from that, be it as wider stream buffers, conservation areas, whatever else it might be. And one example might be is that Greenwood was one of only 3 companies to come out and kind of support the House Bill 2020 in the past. We got beat up pretty good by some folks, such as our senator for this area and the Timber Unity folks, but we still held firm to that and still do. So we encourage the committee to look at that. The other, it seems, that would complement that would be a statement, an aspirational statement, is that if you want forest lands to maximize carbon sequestration, you need to support intensive forest management. And that's a way to keep the area well stocked in trees, keep the trees growing well, and then you could add something in there if you wanted to as far as that rate or time that they were sequestering that carbon. So it would be nice to put something in there saying that you supported the tools that foresters have to keep forests healthy and to keep them sequestering carbon at their maximum potential rate. So that's one. The other thing relating to water, we've kind of touched on it real quick, would be is that and it relates, I think, to Goal 4 and for the environmental benefits of a watershed, would be to somehow looking at, if we look at the total water availability from a watershed, we're allocating certain amount to consumption. We talked about that earlier. Would be looking at, with climate change and the anticipated amount of water yields from a watershed, of how that water is going to be allocated. And again, this is just aspirational, and how that should potentially be used as a planning guideline, knowing that whatever build out is going to be for human consumption of that water, that if we're really concerned about the aquatic environment for the watershed, you need to leave some in the stream for the fish. And we've got a lot of anadromous fish that need that water resource too. You don't hear that conversation a lot.
No, that's good.
Of somehow in there, somehow balancing that the planning is going to take place. All that water is not available for human consumption. Some of it needs to be left for the environment and the other species that are counting on us to have that consideration and looking out for their needs too. So,
Yeah, I think that's an important
Yeah,
point.
it is.
we spend a lot of time with the landowner, for taking care of the water. We're pretty proud of the water that comes off. What the DEQ says is that forest land is the best source of water in the state that's coming off of there. Doing stream restoration, keep it in a good shape as possible. And so we're in the same boat with you. We want to protect that too, but a lot of times we're doing all those efforts. We want it for human consumption. We're one of the major forest land watershed owners in the county. That's with Astoria having their own. You probably know Astoria bought their watershed when it was one big clear cut when they acquired it.
Yep.
And it's doing fine now, it all recovers. But would be is protecting that water for not only human consumption, but for the fish. So.
But that's where the transient occupancy comes in and works against that.
Right.
Well, we got so many things thrown up here in the air.
Basically, you're saying drinking water, everybody's drinking it.
Everybody.
Everybody's drinking it. That's right.
Or flushing it down the toilet, or taking a shower.
Well, yeah, but I'm
leaving
thinking
it down
about
in beer cans.
all the critters.
Filling up a hot tub.
Yeah.
But Carl, what was the point about the water that there
there were 1 million gallons used, but we processed 4 million because of the rain.
That's the ingress into the sanitary system.
So a lot of that ends up
Wood
going back into
incursion and-
creeks.
Yeah, just,
Yeah.
that's the thinking, Ron, one of the last things I recall him saying is we should have celebration with fireworks. I think it was September when we sold 1.1 million gallons and we processed 1.4 million. He says this has never happened. But of course that changed the next month when it started
When it
raining.
rained, yeah.
So sometimes it's hugely imbalanced. I recall like 5 times.
Yeah, so we processed a lot more than we used.
Especially in the wintertime.
Yeah.
And that winds up in storage? What happens to it? It gets treated. It's treated and it's, reasonably clean. It's clean enough.
But it's not
It meets all the
stored.
EPA standards and then during the wintertime, it's discharged into Archgate Creek. In the summertime, when the flow rates are down, it's dispersed to a pond that's pumped up to a pond not far from the site, maybe a half mile or so, maybe less. And then when the pond reaches a certain level, then it's irrigated out around several acres around that. But it's all treated in this whole clean water well within the EPA standards. So you're not flushing, it's chlorinated water then? I don't think we chlorinate water here, do we?
No.
I'm not on the water board, I'm on the sewer board.
Some of the plants, Cannon View I think does, but Archgate uses.
Filters.
there's
I
filters.
believe we
It's
remove
super
120
expensive.
substances, as I've heard that number, but I'm not on that board, so.
I used to
Well,
call those-
we're getting way off track here. So
But that's
I would like to
disgusting.
capture some of the ideas that have been thrown up, and not quite sure how to do it. We started off with with alternate incentivizing the forest landowners to preserve forest land, such as these alternate methods to incentivize forest landowners, such as carbon sequestration. And then we jumped to some other subjects, all very valuable, such as what you were pointing out.
Maybe we could just,
Do we
what
want
do we
to,
have?
shall we deal with these one at a time?
Yeah,
In the last 10 minutes that we have?
I don't think we're gonna finish.
No, we're not going to finish, that's for sure. County should consider alternate ways to incentivize forest land owners to preserve forest land, such could include carbon sequestration, or such as carbon sequestration.
Yeah, I would say like, such as, credits for carbon sequestration or,
Okay,
because we're like monetizing carbon sequestration.
And if you just say monetized carbon sequestration, I think that might be, if that's general enough.
Okay, yeah. Don't want to rule, we don't want to say it has to specifically be this mechanism. Instead of credits for, just put monetized.
which is monetized, is that a word?
It
Oh,
is.
yeah, oh, baby. But in
Monetized.
today's world, oh, yes.
Okay,
You could say like monetize carbon sequestration and like incentives for wildlife habitat or something. Is that?
well, no, you just said ways to preserve forest land. We don't need to say what it's for.
Okay.
It could be,
But you could.
But there's, you can get money for sequestering carbon, and you could get like either money or tax breaks or whatever for
Other conservation practices. or
other
Oh.
conservation practices.
He's so good, isn't
oh,
he?
good. Yeah, that's good.
I like the generality.
There's a lot of room for growth in
Exactly.
that.
The other point, excuse me.
County should consider alternate ways to incentivize forest
forgotten the water.
landowners to preserve forest land, such as monetized carbon sequestration or other conservation practices.
And then I just asked, but the other point, excuse me, that I tried to make for that was In House Bill 2020, they use the term, intensive forest management, encouraging intensive forest management to maximize carbon sequestration rates. That's generally enough.
I wouldn't want to prescribe a certain kind of forest management if we don't really know, if we're not really experts in forestry.
Okay.
That's the thing. Like,
You could still say you encourage the maximization of carbon sequestration.
right. Well, the thing about maximizing carbon sequestration that concerns me a little bit, like in general it's a good thing, is that I know that like old growth forests actually do not have very high carbon sequestration rates, but they do provide crucial habitat for some animals. So I wouldn't want everything to be managed in such a way to be sucking as much carbon as possible, but certainly it would be appropriate for large sections of it.
Complex adaptive.
Complex.
And you could add in private forests or working forests or something, maximizing
Right.
carbon sequestration on working forests or private timberlands or something in there if you wanted, if you had that concern.
Okay, I've read this now.
What do we think?
Anybody want to read it again?
Do we want to add anything, or what do you guys think?
I think it's pretty
Keep it
good as it
pretty.
is. yeah.
Okay.
And it captures some of Linda's
Yes,
concerns.
yes,
Okay.
it does.
Okay.
That's the point of it. And that's how we started.
Okay, let's read it one more time.
All
Where
right.
did we start?
County should consider alternate ways to incentivize forest land owners to preserve forest land, such as monetizing carbon sequestration or other conservation practices. Do they get money for other conservation practices?
No.
No, I don't think so. So that's kind of throwing something in there that isn't part of it.
Well,
But it's aspirational.
It is aspirational.
It's aspirational, right?
That's
They
right,
do.
maybe they should.
You want to encourage and incentivize those practices, is what
Okay.
it sounds like you're saying.
Now, okay,
I don't see an issue with that.
That's good.
well, is it going to die or is somebody going to move it?
I move that we send that as a recommendation.
I'll second.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Good, unanimous.
So we're down to 10 to 12.
Yeah, we are. Now, it would be nice if we could get through these, but it also, if we're going to have to go back and do some of this anyway, it'd be even better, I suppose, when Linda and Charles are here.
Yeah.
So how can we best use our last 10 minutes?
Don't we have, we're supposed to just,
Yeah, we have to close out. We have some more things here.
well, you have us going till 12:30 again.
It's up to you.
But we're supposed to have public comment, then
Yes.
holiday schedule in preparation for goal 5.
The
And then
agenda is
also
just a general
Closing
guide.
comments.
So
Yeah.
you don't have to stick rigidly to the time frames that are set in the agenda. It's just sort of a guide.
Right, but those are things we need to do.
Well,
Like we need
how-
to decide if we're having a December meeting.
Let's decide right now if we want to go till 12:25 or we want to wrap it up at 12.
Are there more cookies?
Huh?
Good question.
There we go.
Well, then I can go to 12:25.
Chris?
Anytime you can end the meeting early, I'm okay with that.
Oh, I'm be like the only one taking.
Okay,
Anyone
well,
else? No.
Then we're shooting for 12:15.
Okay.
Okay, good.
12:15, there we go.
Being
Does
a
anyone else want a
compromise.
cookie? Okay.
And,
Thanks, Leanne.
okay, now, how can we best use this time? If we are going to go back over these and review them ourselves, which I think is a very good idea, then we do that all at one meeting.
Okay.
And we could go back through, we could finish up with these things that we started. We talked about tree buffers, but we leaped to the preservation of forest land. And then we have the point about water should be preserved not just for water districts, but also for natural wildlife and preservation of streams. Allow me to go on with Linda's things here. What have we got left? Now, she has this thing about preservation of forest land we just covered for now in the future. So I'm going to take that off. Recreation is one we haven't dealt with. Now, that isn't one of hers. I think I have that one. Recreation is one of the primary objectives of the forest management. Yet forest lands are inaccessible to the public because of gates which block the access roads. So I would like to see something, some kind of an aspirational goal that says that all forest land should be accessible unless there's a specific reason to not have it accessible.
Sounds dangerous.
Lawsuits. I mean, that's why they got
Liability.
locked off, was lawsuits.
Fire.
So you're saying this would include private land, is that
Yes,
right?
yeah, I'm thinking of all forest land.
Well, in classic county, again, with us being the largest landowner, our lands are open to public access recreation 365 days a year, usually, unless it's high fire danger. And all we ask is that people get a free online permit. It takes 5 minutes to get it, and that permit just gives us an accessible way to be able to communicate to them. So our lands, we're already doing that, and then our gates have been open for 5 weeks now, and they'll stay open here for a couple more weeks during hunting season.
So if a private landowner can do it, why can't the county do it? Are we so timid?
There's a lot, the reason, as I understand it, when I came, because I said, how come they're closed? They said lawsuits, and they said that some kids had made it a practice to go up and drink beer in the woods or whatever they were drinking in the woods, and there was an accident and somebody got killed, and there was a lawsuit which resulted in significant damages, and the lawyers and the insurance company said you have to regulate that because it's an attractive nuisance and an exposure to risk for, again, taxpayer dollars.
Gosh, it troubles me that we, as a society, are so timid and so frightened of lawsuits. It's
Very
just,
expensive. It's your taxpayer dollars paying for it.
And one way you might be able to do it is there are, again, back to laws on the books that have helped protect the liability of a private landowner if they allow recreation on there. So it could be some statement of supporting those regulations that limit liability if you allow recreationals on your property, and you can charge up to a certain amount and still have that law protect you. Some landowners have decided to charge more and go ahead and buy additional liability, but that would be supporting something that's in statute already, encouraging to be able to encourage that public use.
you say that, is that an insurance you can buy? Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying the county should have?
Well, there's state laws that actually allow, it's a recreational use liability limitation on there. You can still get sued, you still have to defend yourself, but they won't be successful. That's not that uncommon, but it would be supporting some of those things, or just even supporting, the almost like the statement you had without the introduction that people don't have access to it now. That's what just concerned me about a couple of the statements today, false claims of concerns about a lot of things.
Yeah.
And that access was just one of them. So you can still make the aspirational thing that you encourage recreational use. I mean, it's healthy. It's a nice asset that we've got. It adds community value to forest land there, and then support regulations that would encourage, incentivize private landowners to do that. So, and if there's something,
Not just private, but county as well.
all of them.
Yeah,
And then
all
that
forest
applies to all of
landowners.
them. I think that applies to state land too. And then going further would be as some of you might be aware, we took upon ourselves to initiate some mountain biking trail systems off the Clutchie Park. And that was just an idea that one of our foresters, Mark, was involved with it actually, and a local recreation user group. And we've got a fairly elaborate system of mountain biking trails out there now. And if you really wanted to incentivize that, you could come up with, maybe the county would look at, we're not asking for it, but would look at maybe in those tax lots where you really focus recreation on your private property, you would have some incentive, perhaps tax encouragement.
Forgiveness a little bit.
So, to your words, as some, because it does have an additional cost for the landowner and
Right,
exposure
absolutely,
on there.
yeah.
So, but somehow we like it, but if there's a way, if there'd be some other incentive that we can point to when we're communicating with our managers and owners and stuff, that hey, we're doing this, and you get an additional.
And it is relieving like pressure on county parks, but because you're providing another recreation alternative.
Yeah.
And
that the
101
county
was
doesn't
not.
have to maintain.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example because they started at County Park and then they go on to our forest land to ride. So it's a nice collaborative system.
That's pretty cool.
I don't know, songwriting, so it's very well for you.
I know. Well, there was a City of Portland case, there was a runner who was running, I think, on Waterfront Park, and there was, I think she was vision impaired, and she fell because there was an obstacle that wasn't marked properly or protected properly, and so she sued and won. And so then there was a bill in the legislature, and there were lots of concerns about the exposure to county taxpayers for people who recreate and get hurt and want to recover losses from someone.
Yeah, there was a case recently where it was decided that individual maintenance employees for public agencies, I don't know if that's the same one, can be held responsible.
Yeah.
You can actually sue an individual maintenance worker who
You know,
works for a public agency maintaining parks.
Well, and to Todd's point, it's a litigious society where if I suffer or feel wronged, I'm entitled to recompense for that, and somebody has to pay that. So it's two conflicting instincts. One is to be generous and to share, and the other is, but you owe me if something bad happens.
Yeah, I know it's true. We encourage forest landowners, private, county and state, to open forest land to recreational use. This could be accomplished by such measures as tax incentives or limits on liability, or limits on liability. Is that too specific? No? Nobody like that? Okay.
No, I think that's good.
Is that
It's a
okay?
good start, yeah.
Try to cover that.
And I think most of these will evolve, and so I think let's get something down on paper, and then we can.
All right. Was that a motion then?
Yes, I so move.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. It's moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. It's passed unanimously. Okay, let's see, what else have we got here that we might pick up on?
Did we want to do anything with the buffers or the water?
Yeah, let's
Just
do,
to kind of finish our thoughts on
Yeah,
that, and
we want to
then next
put-
meeting, maybe we'll talk about it.
we don't want to lose those.
Could I ask a question? When will you do public?
What's that?
I was wondering when you were going to have public comment. Or if
We
you
have-
are going to.
Oh.
We have that at the end, but I would like to hear, because people have been speaking all along. So
Yeah, I
what,
know.
do you have a comment?
Well, I wasn't sure whether we.
Well, it was
You're
on the,
doing-
it
you're
was on the
actually
schedule
only one
for,
following the rules.
it was on the schedule for 12, so maybe we should just go ahead and let folks do that. And
Let's
we'll
do
see
it.
if we have time.
Yeah, well, let's first,
Let's
yeah,
do it.
public comment. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say, 40 years ago, going through this same thing, putting boundaries around water districts would be, in my view, an important thing to do, to identify what is a watershed, so to speak. 40 years ago, when this whole thing was happening with SB 100, our district suggested putting an overlay zone around our water district, and we presented it to the commissioners, Clatsop County commissioners, and at that meeting, all the forest companies' lawyers attended that meeting, and of course, the commissioners didn't have the gumption to follow that sort of thing,
Right, yeah.
because that's where they get their money, right?
Just to identify it. To identify the,
Identify in the county what are the watersheds. Why is that not talked about? I mean, I've just been to a meeting, and I think our commissioner here was at the meeting, that the state is doing a 100-year plan. They're wanting to open a plan about identifying the plan for the water in the state. The state owns the water. What can we do about it? Why aren't we considering it right here when making these decisions? Because everything's covered by forest here.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's the only place you can start, is identifying where's the water, who is using the water, and what's the boundary of that water.
Yeah, shed.
So that's another comment I want to make. Isn't it true that the private forests don't come under Forest Practice Act? Or do they have to follow the Forest Practice Act to get their tax money, right? To be in their forest taxes?
Any commercial harvest of timber is
Has to
subject
follow.
to the Forest Practices
Right.
Act. Yes.
But they're not committed to being sustainable, are they?
They're committed to the Forest Practices Act.
Which the law for sustainability doesn't come under it?
It incorporates ideas around sustainability, but I think what the committee has expressed in the discussion is that it may not go far enough.
Yeah, okay. And also shipping, identifying what is a treated log, like the logs you see that are the bark taken off and then shipped overseas. Is that a considered use for what? Treatment of the log as...
Not under Gulf 4, as far as I'm aware. It doesn't. As far as I'm aware, it doesn't address processing of timber into forest products or treatment of the logs or anything like that. It just has to do with management of the land for commercial trees and harvesting, but not what happens after that.
Not what happens. So for sustainability purposes, does the state logs, even if they're barked, can they be shipped?
I don't think they can be shipped. No, they have to be
Good.
used. They have to be used in the United States. The United States, not the state, right? They have to be milled.
Foreign.
Yeah.
Foreign.
Like there's Washington state logs that come down to Hampton's Mills in Tillamook County and Cuyahoga County and Clatsop County.
Yeah. Anyway, that's what I have. I just think it's important to identify
All domestic watersheds.
domestic watersheds. I mean, 40 years ago, that's what happened. Nothing happened. And it's 40 years later, and we still can't protect our watersheds, our public watersheds, it seems like.
Is that a question, I guess, for the group? Is that, I believe it's the yellow lines on that map
Oh,
up there.
well, I
But
haven't-
doesn't the county have a layer of watersheds currently?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the North Coast Watershed Association.
The basins, yeah.
But do they have all the public water districts included in that?
I'm not sure, but there is the DEQ publishes the source water drinking areas, and you can get that data, and that shows on a map where the overlays are. The DEQ supplies that.
So they do exist.
It
Well,
does
but-
exist, yeah.
So
We have water
where-
districts taxed and
Do
non-taxed.
they have all water districts?
Water districts taxed and non-taxed.
You have
Those are layers.
Those are layers.
Those are informational layers.
And those are the watersheds.
No, those are the water districts.
Water districts,
Oh,
not the
Which
sheds.
she's talking
Yeah,
about.
well, the watersheds, the basins themselves are also identified. That's a layer as well.
Oh, they are.
Yeah,
All
but
right.
that's a large thing. I mean, it shows,
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's-
they'd be very large.
And who manages that data? I think part of the question is who
The question
holds
is-
that information, who keeps it up to date? It's not the county, as far as I'm aware. It's
The
the
question-
watershed associations, DEQ, DSL.
well, we get the information, it comes through our IT department
We have it
for
as a
actually
layer.
placing it as a layer on web maps. But they're getting the information a lot of the times through taxing districts
Yeah, do they all?
and through the watershed councils themselves.
And also the USGS supplies the National Hydrography data.
Well, right, but small watersheds,
Yeah,
when
but
the
the
county
smaller
when the water district it's back to talking about the water districts being able to talk to the counties and have them aware and listen and protect. That's all.
Okay, but I'm hearing that you do have overlays
You do have that.
already.
There are layers, not overlays, but layers, because they're not adopted by the county. It's just informational.
Oh, I see.
And it shows where the basins are, each of the watershed basins are.
Okay.
And then the water districts, if they've provided information, those will be listed as well. I think there's like one missing up in Fern Hill. Other than that, I'm not aware of any that are missing, but it basically just lights it up a color on the map.
I see. Okay.
And I cannot speak to whether or not those are completely accurate, because it's just a data layer.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be off a property or two. A line could zig instead of zag. That's
Yeah.
So one of the keywords you mentioned earlier, phrases, was overlay zones. And so we don't have something like that right now.
I understand.
There's not a boundary that says this is a watershed protection overlay or something like that. That would be a county regulation to protect that zone. That does not currently.
And that's,
So that would be something that would be aspirational.
aspirational.
right.
We could
So,
do.
yes,
As it
you've got
was
like
40 years ago.
right. I think you have like three different things we're talking about. We're talking about the water basins, the water districts, and then the watersheds. And I think those are all three different
Watersheds.
things. And so if it's the watershed, we don't have, for example, the buffer zone around a specific water district's watershed. I'm not aware that we have that.
Right.
We probably don't have that information for that matter. It wouldn't be hard to create a layer.
Right. Like you tried to get 40 years ago. Anyway, that's all I have to say at this point.
May I make a comment? That was at the Planning Commission
Yes.
yesterday morning. I was there. Did you know that there's a salmon-bearing stream right behind Susanna Lease? You can see the eggs and little tiny fish sometimes.
Huh.
Yeah, and it's not protected.
And which creek is this?
It's
In
I don't know.
Seaside.
Yeah, in Seaside.
Right,
Behind
Seaside.
Susanna Lease is an assisted
Living.
facility, and it's right behind there.
That creek.
Yeah, it was amazing. I was just trying to take a walk. I was visiting a friend there. I was amazed.
I'll be darned. I have no knowledge of that. That's interesting. Do you guys have anything to say about that?
It's inside the Seaside city limits.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Not the planning.
Okay. Let's get back to identification of domestic
Did
watersheds.
anyone else have,
Huh? Pardon me?
I was just wondering if anyone else had public comment?
Oh, you're right. You are so good.
And she's really nice about
Any
it.
other public comment?
They've already commented, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With regard to your issue, we'll do this next meeting. We'll put together an aspirational statement.
And just as a point of order, for the way we have outlined the agenda in this meeting and in past meetings is for the goal 4 discussion, which started an hour and a half ago. We've identified the public as part of that. And so it's been past practice of this committee to allow public comment during that discussion.
Yes.
It's best
Like
to
on one.
it's
Yeah.
best to ask the chair for permission to chime in. The discussion should primarily be among the committee members.
Yes.
But the idea is that we integrate that with public comment along the way too, that we don't just wait until
Right.
the
I
end
remember
for you to say a
Right.
piece. So just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah.
I had a
But I
comment.
appreciate your being so diligent as to the rules, even though we weren't. I wasn't, I should say. Okay, holiday schedule. Have we talked that through, or what do we
Did
have
we-
coming up?
Well, are you guys thinking that we need to do a December meeting to kind of continue this
I think so.
discussion? I mean, because we have some things that we've tabled.
Yes,
We have members who clearly have strong opinions.
yes.
Okay. Who aren't here.
So what would the date be?
Well, we had, let's see, December 11th.
Okay, is that good with staff?
We have it on our calendar as a placeholder since it's the regularly occurring meeting date. So I think, as far as I'm aware, that works for us.
I could not tell you about my schedule. I'm looking at my personal one, and I don't see any issue with it,
Yeah.
but I don't have my work calendar in front of me right
I
now.
looked at it before we came, and that was the only thing on the calendar that day, so I don't see any conflicts for us.
Okay,
So December 11th at 10 a.m.
yeah, right here.
here.
Yeah. You and I should carpool.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Closing comments. Any of the public have any closing
I
comments?
do.
Yes.
The other thing is maybe this community should recommend goal 19. Make a goal 19 and have it designated as water, to cover water, just water, period.
Okay.
There is a goal 19.
And what is it?
It's the oceans and beaches.
Ocean beaches. Well,
Oceans and
maybe we
resources.
should add water.
Okay, well, these are the statewide planning goals.
I understand.
So you would recommend then having a 20th goal to the state?
Or maybe you could just add it to the water out there. You could add it to an existing as clean water that we drink and
You should come for goal 5.
I was just going to say, now's a
She
good
needs to come for
time.
goal 5. Let's plug goal 5.
Now's a good time. I just passed out the background report on Goal 5, which includes natural resources, open
Which is
spaces,
water.
wetlands, things like that. So
And water.
that, I think what you're asking for already exists. I'm not exactly sure, but I think it's covered by Goal 5. And so that discussion will begin early 2020. We'll probably be on hiatus through March and come back in April. I think is the
Probably,
plan.
with goal 5, and we'll be dispersing materials along the way, and it will all be on the internet, but goal 5 is large. You're going to end up with multiple binders.
So yeah, this.
I was starting to think that the binder was getting full.
Do you need another binder? You can pick one up at our office. We do have extras.
You can also just put stuff on your shelf.
I know mine is full.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I started just like bringing the relevant ones.
Right,
Yeah.
that's kind of what I.
That is good.
Okay, if I need
Okay.
another binder, I'll.
So just
I'll
for the
let you know.
committee members, the information that I gave you is, it's got the background report on Goal 5, and then it's got the statewide planning goal and the current adopted county Goal 5 element. And that's it. So there's no other background reports or anything like you got for Goal 4. That's just, Goal 5 is
Holy
a
cow.
beast. So this is sort of just scratching the surface and dipping our toes into Goal 5. And there will be plenty more.
Goal
Okay.
5 is natural resources. Goal 5 is huge.
Yeah, yeah.
Is Goal 5 one of the larger, or are we going to be getting more?
It's probably the largest.
Yeah.
Okay.
The land use planning was a very, but that had background material also.
And we have a meeting, then the next meeting after December would be March.
Probably April.
March or April, probably April.
Oh,
March or
really?
April, but
Okay.
probably April. It's going to take us that long to put all the materials together.
So there'll be some like workshops and stuff. in the
Oh, yeah, for
meantime?
goal,
I don't know what we.
I'm not sure exactly, we're definitely having workshops for goal 5.
Uh-huh,
I don't know when exactly those will be scheduled.
okay.
We'll probably kind of get started on them in the spring. You
Okay.
might have those before you have your next meeting, or you might have one
Okay.
to get the party started.
I'm not opposed to having a break. I just, you know,
No, that's nice.
Put my notebook
don't want to slack off too much.
No,
Oh, you won't get a chance.
it is
No
such
slacking.
a comprehensive and complex document and process that we're going through. And so I think what we're trying to do is be adaptive in how we approach things and sort of have a framework for how we're going through this, but not knowing exactly what each step is going to be. So,
Yeah.
Well, you never could. And it
Right,
would just be frustrating.
When we first started, where the idea was one goal per month,
yeah,
I
Yeah.
did find that a little terrifying because it seems like a really fast pace.
it's a lot to get through.
Some of them you can do that fast.
Yeah, yeah,
Some of them you cannot.
yeah, yeah.
Well, Chris, thank you for coming and joining.
Yeah, that was good.
Delighted to have you.
Are you adjourned?
Drinking from the firehouse.
Are you adjourned?
Yes, we are adjourned.
Thank you.